Society has changed its name lately to International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society, because we recognize that the name MDS did not convey the true message that most of the patients we deal with are patients with Parkinson's disease, which is the most prevalent of movement disorders in our field. So the question is how MDS aims to serve the world and envisions collaboration with the advocacy community. But I think, first of all, you have to understand what is MDS. And MDS is a professional society. It's composed of clinicians, researchers, and allied health professionals, and it has over 6,000 members in 127 countries around the world. So as you can see, this is a very large, inclusive, and worldwide society. Our mission and goals are described here in summary. Our primary objective is to disseminate knowledge about movement disorders throughout the world, to promote research into the causes, the prevention, and the treatment of movement disorders, and to provide expertise, advice, and guidance to regulatory agencies, the public and patient support groups, governments, and educational efforts to assist in developing standards of training in the specialty. So as you can see, this is an overarching mission with individual goals that we try to serve in different capacities. One of the major elements of our society, our flagship event, is the International Congress of Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders. The society was founded more than 30 years ago by some of the top pioneers in the field of Parkinson's disease and movement disorders. And this is the 21st International Congress of Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders that will take place in Vancouver, in Canada, in June of 2017. At the beginning of the organization of our society, we ran meetings every other year or every 2 years. But then, because of the demand of educational programs throughout the world grew exponentially, we decided to go to meetings on a yearly basis, and we have been quite successful in that regard. Our last meeting was in Berlin in June of this year, and we had 5,500 attendees from more than 87 countries. So we have decided to continue to hold meetings on a yearly basis because of the many advances in the field that happen every month and that people need to know about. We have other tools for the dissemination of knowledge about movement disorders and Parkinson's disease, and we have a really award-winning website where you can go freely and explore it, because many of the items that we offer on our website, you don't need to be a member to access them, and there is also information for patients there that you can access without being a member of the society. We have a prestigious journal that is published for many years now that it's called Movement Disorders. It's one of the top journals in the neuroscience field, and we have recently included, because of the demand of the clinicians to have a journal that appeals to those that practice clinical work instead of basic research or clinical research, we have decided to launch 2 years ago an online journal called Movement Disorders Clinical Practice. And it has been such a success that we have increased from 4 numbers a year to 6 numbers a year now because of the demand of publishing papers with a clinical appeal. The International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society, as the primary goal, has to provide education to doctors throughout the world. And if you can see the figures here, MDS has educated more than 11,000 neurologists and allied health professionals in 2015. And we have done that throughout the world, and programs were held in 20 different countries in every single corner of the world, as you can see by the dots in the presentation. And is such the success of our educational programs that for the year 2016 and 2017, we have increased by 1/3 the number of educational offerings that we are providing throughout the world. And we also had to increase the number of personnel in our staff to accommodate to that increasing demand of educational activities. We are a very democratic and open society, and we have tried very hard to give back to the movement disorder community. And in that sense, we have decided to provide free membership for residents, for students, for fellows, or from any other doctors that come from underserved areas of the world. They don't have to pay anything. They don't have to pay a membership fee to become members of the society, and they get all the benefits the society has to offer through the website, through the journals, the online educational programs. We also provide international Congress travel grants, and so far, or until this year, we were giving 100 travel grants to come to our meetings, and from next year onwards, we have increased the number of travel grants to 250, and an equivalent number of free registrations for those that cannot afford to pay for the registration fee of our meetings. So we are trying, as long as the society can afford it, to open it up as much as possible so that people get engaged into all our educational offerings. We have among our goals to advance the knowledge in the field, and we have a very complex structure that is made, of course, by the membership, but we have different committees, study groups, special interest groups, and task forces. And if you look at the list of task forces, you can see that we have, a long time ago, we created a task force on Africa. Task forces in our society are organized at the mandate of the president and the officers of the society with a specific mandate. They have to achieve a certain goal in a certain amount of time. And the task force on Africa had the mandate to provide educational offerings in underserved areas throughout Africa. And probably Dr. Okubadejo has told you about the task force on Africa because she has been for a long time an active participant. We believe so much in empowering the people in underserved areas that we are now in the process, and we have had talks with the African Academy of Neurology in order to phase out the task force and create an African section. In our society, different regions of the world are organized to provide educational activities in regional sections. We have the European section, the Asian Oceanian section, and the recently created Pan American section that goes throughout the Americas from north to south. And we believe the people in Africa deserve to have the equal treatment as the other regions of the world. That is why we are engaged in creating an African task force. We also are aware that some regions of the world, independent of the regional where they belong, like the Middle East, have special interest, and therefore we have recently created a task force for the Middle East, trying to engage people in that region to make them aware about Parkinson's disease and movement disorders, and to organize educational courses in the region. And it has been very successful, and we have had many, many educational activities in different countries of the Middle East in the last couple of years. But we also have task forces for specific scientific activities, like you can see the task force on the definition of Parkinson's disease. This is very important, even though we have already many, many criteria for the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. The knowledge about Parkinson's disease has evolved so much in recent years, and we know that Parkinson's disease is a complex disorder that starts many years before the first motor symptomatology becomes apparent. And that phase of the disease is called prodromal Parkinson's disease. And our task force on the definition of Parkinson's disease has recently completed research and has published it in our journal, the definition of prodromal Parkinson's disease, which is very important because the earlier we can diagnose Parkinson's disease, the better we can treat it, and maybe in the future we can introduce preventive measures or therapeutics that what they attempt is to slow down the process of the disease or to stop it. And the earliest we can do that, the better. We have also task forces on tremor, on Huntington's disease, on dystonia, on the genetic nomenclature of movement disorders, and a very recently created task force on technology, the mandate of which is to explore every single available device that can be applied for the treatment of patients, for the assessment of symptomatology, what we call wearables and assisted devices that are nowadays one of the most important advances in both the evaluation of patients and in the administration of medications in a continuous fashion. We also have a very important task force on telemedicine because we know that sometimes it is not possible to reach every single corner of the world, and education and information technology go hand in hand nowadays, and we have several projects of telemedicine in distant regions of the world, not only dedicated to education of doctors, but to the education of undergraduates, trying to make them aware about the existence of the field of Parkinson's disease and movement disorders. And I have recently created a task force on palliative medicine because we also know that Parkinson's disease and many of the other movement disorders that we deal with sometimes go through phases in which we have to give them more than drugs, management, and management of the later stages of the disease include many of the important palliative measures that the Task Force on Palliative Medicine will explore in the future. We also have people that are interested in the research of different areas of movement disorders and Parkinson's disease. And to that effect, we have what we call study groups. The non-motor PD has been a very active study group trying to deal with a less known symptomatology in Parkinson's disease, which is the whole range of non-motor symptoms that patients with Parkinson's disease experience. And this study group not only deals with designing scales to assess non-motor disorders, but trying to explore ways to deal with non-motor disorders. And we also have a multiple system atrophy, epidemiology, rare disorders, spasticity. Neuroimaging is a recently created study group because, you know, one of the major difficulties in the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease and many other Parkinsonian syndromes is that we do not have specific biomarkers for the diagnosis of this disorder. So we rely on clinical criteria. And neuroimaging has been a very active field in which, through the many different aspects of neuroimaging, they are trying not only to understand how the brain works, but also trying to find parameters of modifications of the brain function that can be specifically assigned to different Parkinsonian disorders. And we also have study groups on other types of Parkinsonian disorders, like the progressive supranuclear palsy study group. We are firm believers that if we want to attain our ultimate goal, that is to provide the best medical care for our patients, we have to educate doctors throughout the world. And particularly in those areas of the world that are underserved, that don't have the same access to information as some of the developed countries. And so we are actively engaging colleagues through the creation of task forces, as I mentioned, the African Task Force, the Middle East. We also are working very hard with our Chinese colleagues, trying to engage them in our society, because surprisingly, even though it's one of the largest countries in the world, it has very few members in our society. We also have partnerships with foundations like the Michael J. Fox Foundation and the SAFRA Foundation. We have patient resources on the MDS website. As I told you, you can access them freely without being a member of the society, and we are trying to provide the most comprehensive information that has been reliably tested and explored by specialists in the field and put freely in our website. And as I told you before, we are looking forward to working with all the advocacy groups, to all societies that have interests in common with our areas of research. So we're always looking forward to advance, to improve to educate, and to collaborate. Thank you.